thing comes up in the Scottish Rugby blog, if you don't mind just sharing it to the various places that it tends to go. And so this is us being all kind of right.
It's probably easier to do it with my phone.
Aye, well, we're live now, so let's get a wee record on here and record to the clouds. And yeah, we'll just get ourselves all set up.
Live now.
We are live. We are live.
Live now, Ian.
I don't know what you're implying there, Sandy.
Neither do I.
Right, where is it?
This is everyone's getting to see the wonders of our technological ineptitude here. Never ask you to do anything that involves technology here.
The keyboard wizard's not here.
No, absolutely not. So yeah,
John's not even got a soundboard. What's that about? Oh, what's happened there? So when he turned into a robot,
that's maybe my laugh, to be fair. So I guess we should probably start. Hopefully people can see us on Facebook and various other locations. If they cannot, that is a shame, and you will see this after the fact. But let's just assume people can see this for now. Obviously, I am not Cameron Black, despite what my wee name tag may or may not say. Cammy has, despite having months where nothing was happening, Cammy has decided to choose the 1 week where Scottish Rugby returns to go off on holiday, off on his jollies. So you've got myself hosting, John Anderson, and joining me tonight, as you'll see, we have Sandy Smith.
Evening all.
And the wonder that is Ian Hay, still trying to figure out technology.
I'm trying to share this because you can't do your job properly. Hello everyone, how are we? It's amateurs in the driving seat.
It's amateur hour.
Where else am I sharing this?
Wherever you want, mate. Wherever you want. Amateur hour is with us. So, I take it we're well, gents, yes?
Indeed, yep.
That was an interesting call there, Ian. So,
it's been one of the weeks.
It's been one of those weeks. Will we start with some news? Yes. Gentlemen. So, yes. The first bit of news that I noticed came out earlier on today. The South African teams are no more for this season. They have decided they will not participate. Originally, it came out the Kings were pulling out for the rest of 2020. It's then came out the Cheetahs have done the same due to restrictions in South Africa regarding travel. The Pro 14 have issued a statement saying that they will obviously look at ways to move the tournament forward in their absence, with a view to reviewing in January what's continuing. One of the suggestions that's been put forward is that the teams will look to play each other once in the run-up to January. And then if the South African teams can't return, they would just reverse the fixtures and go back to kind of the old style Pro 12. Obviously, if the South African teams can come back in, then you've got some gap weeks that you'll be able to fit games in. But yeah, I'll come to you, Sandy, first. Is a wee bit of a surprise, but I know the Kings have been struggling, but certainly it was a surprise to hear about the Cheetahs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there was a failed takeover earlier on in the year, which has probably not helped with the budget as well as the COVID nonsense. So I mean, obviously they've been struggling at the bottom of the league all the way through, but it's still a shame to see, because I always think of the supporters in these scenarios, because all of a sudden you thought you had a team in the league, and now it doesn't look as if they're going to be playing any rugby whatsoever. Never mind in the Pro 14, and that's got to be kind of weird for those that support the Kings. And I know that there's not been a lot of them, but even then, but Cheetahs were good value, so that's real. I mean, they made the playoffs in their first year and were always been competitive. And I always think it, if one went, then there was always a good chance the other one would, because you're trying to go to South Africa for one game just doesn't seem like a particularly good use of resources. So I think it's probably sensible at the moment that they both kind of withdraw rather than doing anything else. I suspect it's. I mean, I can see your point with the one round of games. Hopefully, they'll be back in. But if that doesn't work out, then we're playing a lot more. I think we'd end up playing more games than we would just now with 14 teams if if we carried on with it, and which I don't think is particularly helpful. But
no, I think that's fair given everything that's, in terms of the season. It's going to be a really long season with all the internationals to fit in as well. So I think that's fair. Ian, obviously I don't believe you've made the trip over to South Africa, but certainly I don't think Glasgow missed their trips over to Bloemfontein or anywhere like that. Rory Jackson certainly wouldn't have missed it.
No, but that's, like Sandy was saying, the Cheetahs are one of the, well, both teams are very entertaining, but the Cheetahs in particular, they were only a couple of points behind Glasgow. They're a real attacking threat. But you talk about going to Bloemfontein, and if I went, I think Warriors probably took more fans over than actual Cheetahs fans would go, because that stadium was constantly like 85-90% empty. It's just a cavern. No Edinburgh jokes, John. But yeah, as well as what Sandy was saying, if one went, I think the other would go. The Kings have always been struggling to get results on the field, even though they managed to beat both of our teams recently. But looks like we'll be well. Will that be? Do you think it would just be for a season, or what I really worry about is that the clubs will fold, because the South African Rugby Union have said there's no point in throwing money at this, at the Kings in particular, because it would just be a bad investment. There's no point in throwing good money after bad. So, will this just be a temporary thing? Will the clubs fold?
Well, there was rumours, of course, that actually they were looking to amalgamate all the South African Super Rugby teams into. So I believe the negotiations for the new setup for Super Rugby is next season. So not the, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Because we're at the end of a season, but it feels like the beginning of a season. So not this kind of season coming, but the following season. The Super Rugby negotiations, I believe, are up. And there was rumours that they would be looking to move the South African franchises towards the European League. It does open up. Obviously, I think the point around it being a 1 year thing is probably fair, but I think it does open up the gate for the constant rumours about where will the pro how many and where will we end up next. And you can imagine the chat will be, if the two South African franchises do fold and perhaps South Africa can't fund the teams to come over, obviously, I think the current setup's funded by the TV deal mainly. I'm sure we'll start to hear rumours about the American franchises again, and Europe, Germany. There was talk of potentially a German team getting involved as well. So, it's a shame, and I think. I mean, if this was, obviously this is a Scottish rugby podcast. If this was an Italian rugby podcast, we would obviously be a lot better looking. But
speak for yourselves.
but you wouldn't be really, if you were a Zebre or a Treviso supporter, you wouldn't necessarily be relishing the idea of perhaps going back to being the whipping boys of the league.
Or a Dragons fan.
Or a Dragons fan. I know, I always forget about the Dragons. That's how bad they are. You
can't even beat a team with 14 men.
So we've had our first telling off, guys. Cammy's telling us to behave. So our overlord is watching. Hi, Cam.
I think that was aimed at you.
I'm not sure what I've said this time, but anyway. So, any other news? Anything jumping out at you from the world of rugby?
Well, speaking of that Dragons incident where they could be a 14-man Ospreys, George North might be banned for the Scotland-Wales game.
Oh,
He's taken a 4-week, this 4-week in rugby, whatever, right? 4-week ban for his dangerous tackle on Ashton Hewitt. Did you see it at all?
I've not seen the tackle. No.
Yeah, I think he's
careless, really. I thought
very careless. Yeah,
I
mean, I think it was Sean Hawley that was the sort of co-commentator. He thought there was maybe a Dragons player had got in his way and unsighted him, but when you see it on the replay, he's got a clear run at Hewitt, and he's just. I mean, he's focused on the ball. He's not taking into consideration somebody else might be jumping up to get it, and he's cleared Hewitt out dangerously. So
can't argue with it.
Let Laidlaw had to go. But yeah, he might be missing out for Wales. Is there any other news?
Well, on the same subject to Scotland v Wales, I'm sure I read yesterday or today that the game might be getting played now at the Olympic Stadium in London because the Welsh Rugby Union have decided that Twickers is too expensive. The date of the game, which I forget now, West Ham are away, and I think they're the tenants there, I think. So it can easily be played at the Olympic Stadium, which is apparently a good bit cheaper. So it's not set in stone, but I read that today. I think it was today. Yeah.
So the rumour mill's suggesting if you're booking your tickets to head down, aim
big
for
smoke,
that.
Yeah.
Aim for the big
part.
smoke.
Aye.
Don't get stuck in Bristol.
No.
Sounds like,
no, I don't think it was anything else.
Sounds like the RFU are maybe pricing themselves out of the market there. If they're skint and they're wanting to make money back, would it not make sense to undercut the Olympic Stadium?
Fire sale. Yeah. Get your product out there. So I guess we've probably delayed it long enough then. That's the news from this week. Let's talk about the game at the weekend. So, yay! Pro Rugby is back in Scotland. Woo! How excited were we all? That was amazing. Back, obviously, at an empty BT Murrayfield Stadium. You'll note there was no joke there. It was actually, it was eerie. It was strange. It was rusty, but ultimately Edinburgh won out. Comfortable victors in the end up. So I guess we'll come to you for your reaction first, Sandy. Pleased, I assume.
Oh, I delighted. It was. I think before the game kicked off, I was probably more nervous than I think I've ever been for a game of rugby. But I think that was just a lack of action, to be fair. But and it's been a long time since there's been anything that actually had that much at stake in it for Edinburgh. So to get that, and then even at half time, still wasn't feeling particularly good. But Edinburgh do have a good second half game. It's the statistics show out, so they brought that in and they did the business. So delighted, and we'll see how we get on against the boys from Belfast in the coming week. Although we've still got a game to play, but that's the sticking point in between.
How does it feel to be referred to as a sticking point, Ian?
I've been called far worse things in my time.
It's actually fascinating to know how it's going to pan out this week, to be honest. It's, even though there's not a great deal at stake, it's the choices that, and particularly Edinburgh, I've got to make, because that's where my focus is, are quite fascinating.
Yeah, I think it is. It's interesting, and I think, Ian, be good to get your take on this. Edinburgh, obviously, as Sandy alludes to, have the Glasgow game is a distraction for them now. They've got a home semi-final to look forward to. As a Warriors fan, you've been in these semi-finals before. You've seen sometimes you've seen the run up to these semi-finals. Would you, if you were coaching Edinburgh, look at putting out the big guns against Glasgow, look for momentum, or is it a case of lots of changes, rest the big guns, and then come in maybe a bit colder?
Yeah, there is that sort of, that sort of dilemma. Do you roll the dice a wee bit? Do you rest certain players? But there's still guys like Jamie Ritchie and Magnus Bradbury. I don't assume that there's any sort of long-term injuries with them or anything that's going to keep them out. They're probably going to need a wee bit of game time. But obviously, the Edinburgh players, they they won't want to get injured. But if you go into these kind of things with that attitude, you're probably going to end up getting injured. It's kind of sod's law. I think Edinburgh will. Well, Edinburgh have got strength and depth now, so I think they will give people game time. They'll give people a run out. Maybe someone who's the integral parts of the team, like Jaco van der Vaart and Hamish Watson, they'll maybe just get 40 minutes. But I don't think this will be blood and thunder. It won't be your regular derby. I even think the Glasgow coaches, I think they'll be treating both of these games as warm-up matches to try and get the new system embedded in and all that kind of thing.
Yep. So it was interesting. You obviously mentioned Jaco van der Vaart. Second half performance in particular, Sandy, very, very impressive, and obviously Scots qualified or about to be Scots qualified.
Yeah. I think, he really impressed me on at the weekend, to be honest, and he is somewhat underrated, I think, to be honest. He's not flashy in the same way that potentially some of our other choices are for Scotland, as it turns out now, but he very rarely does an awful lot wrong. He's physical enough. He's a decent tackler. He missed no tackles on Saturday. He takes the ball up to the line. He's happy to carry. He doesn't seem to have the tricks that we may see from the likes of Hastings and from Finn Russell at the time. But I think there's probably a good argument to have to say we should have somebody who does something slightly different and gets the basics just done really, really well. The funny thing was everybody was thinking there would be a lot of high balls at the weekend, but kicks for hand for Edinburgh was actually less than it was for Glasgow. So they did try and move the ball quite a wee bit. But I think Jaco's, I think they also said during the match commentary, and when he was interviewed, he hadn't spoke English for 4 months.
Wow.
He'd just been with his family.
Yeah.
So that in itself, coming back and remembering how to speak a language that spoke for such a long time, he certainly looked as if he wasn't rusty, that's for sure.
You'll know yourself, Sandy, that tend not to need to speak language. They just grunt and shout a lot, and you don't really know what they're saying. You just kind of
wave their hands.
I think he means over there. It's fine. I think he did. So me and Ian were chatting during the game, and we were both kind of saying, Hastings had one of those Hastings games where he scores a try. He makes a couple of breaks, he looks all right, but then he kind of has those moments where, he flaps at a couple of tackles, misses a few easy kicks, and, inconsistency from again. And I think we always kind of, especially given that he started in the Six Nations, we forget that Hastings is a young fly half. He's, still less than 50 professional games. He's learning his trade very quickly, but he still has those days. But Jaco in the second half for me was just exactly what he brings to Edinburgh. It was, as you say, that consistency. And I guess coming to you, Ian, the thing about the kicking, it struck me that Glasgow's game plan, and now let's caveat this heavily, I don't want to go thermonuclear on this, but the game plan looked very different under Danny Wilson. Now, it's first game back after a massive layoff. Should we be reading into it, or is it too early and the proof of the pudding will be next season?
Yeah, I think it's too early. There's a lot of weird things going on, such as Matt Fagerson playing open sides, Hugh Jones at 15. I thought Fagerson open side might be a good idea, but he's no Hamish Watson, is he?
Not in Adamson's eyes, he's not. No,
certainly not. It's like I said, I think that they're going to treat these as almost pre-season friendlies. That's certainly how the tackling appeared to be. But I also thought not just Van der Vaart but Groom. I thought he kicked a lot better. All of Price's box kicks, none of them. The kick chase wasn't good, or they were too long. Whereas Edinburgh, even if a Glasgow player took it, someone was on hand to rattle them as soon as he landed. And Van der Vault utilised the cross kick very well. So yeah, Edinburgh definitely got the better upper hand there. I don't think Bryce had a good game at all, to be fair. What about you? What say you, John?
I'd seen that people were saying that Price had a decent game. Obviously, it caused he'd been kind of on top of Groom, causing him a bit of bother around the breakdown, try to hassle him a wee bit. But I thought Price's basics were pretty poor. The ball seemed a lot slower. He spent a lot of time directing forwards. Now, again, that's not a criticism of him necessarily. You know, if shapes might not be there, and if he's not getting what he needs outside him, then you know, right, okay, slow the ball down. But as you said, his box kicking was it just seemed like Scottish box kicking. And what I mean by that is it was average. It didn't seem to serve a purpose other than we were kind of mechanically going through the right, okay, I should box kick this now, as opposed to I've got options here. Let's get the ball high. Let's get, you know, Seymour or Tagivi challenging in the air, or find some ground. There was, I don't remember a box kick from Glasgow finding the grass and getting any territory from it. So, Edinburgh. So, I think it's fair to say Edinburgh got the better of. I mean, all the key stats, Edinburgh were the better team. And I'll be interested to hear what you think in terms of. I think Glasgow were always going into this with a view that this was a pre-season. It was so unlikely that they would get the points and results they needed to even be in with a shot next week or in a couple of days' time. Edinburgh, on the other hand, had a real target to aim for, and I think, and you might disagree here, Sandy, but it seemed like the conditioning of the players seemed to reflect those different kind of objectives.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I mean, you're right. I mean, training for a pre-season is different for training for a semi-final, if you like. There's no doubt about it. And I think it also makes a difference is that you only had to watch Ulster play on Sunday to a side who really, they knew they were in, they were already qualified, and that extra, I don't know whether it's 5%, 10%, wasn't there from Ulster because they were already they had qualified. So Glasgow, and you know, I don't think anybody would have really taken the field thinking it was a realistic chance to qualify. Yeah. I mean, stars had to align somewhat mysteriously for that to happen. So that I think as well makes a big difference to when you step up to one of these matches, if you've got something to play for. And it'll be interesting. Again, it'll be interesting this week to see whether when nobody really got anything to play for, what that does to the game. Does that make it actually maybe even a better game to watch, and we'll have a throw about with the ball and just have a bit of fun with it, or does it degenerate into even more of a error-laden thing? To be honest, I mean, it was quite interesting because there wasn't a lot of penalties conceded tonight for either side for all the big layoff, and I thought it was really good until I looked at Ulster stats on Sunday, and they had conceded 4 penalties, and I thought, okay, that's not particularly encouraging. But I mean, I think Edinburgh had 8, and I think Glasgow had 12 or something. I can't remember off the top, but didn't think it was a huge number until I looked at Ulster's number, and I thought, okay, right, that's a bit worrying.
I think the last stat I seen, and I know these stats tend to get revised up or down, but I think I'd seen Glasgow were at 18 penalties. I mean, that's, obviously teams aim for under 10, but
I was just thinking in terms of, I mean, Super Rugby, the first couple of games in the Super Rugby, there was like 30 odd penalties. I was expecting something very similar, and when it didn't, I was quite surprised. Maybe they've had the benefit of watching those and knowing what to expect from our local whistlers.
So it probably segues quite nicely into our local whistler. So Mike Adamson, 1 minute for Glasgow as a professional player, he's taking charge of quite a few of these 1872s now.
They mention it every time too, don't they?
They do, yes, they do. Yeah, both sets of fans seem to have their own views on it as well. Glasgow think he's preferring Edinburgh to make it clear that he's got no allegiances, and Edinburgh think he's preferring Glasgow because he played a minute for them. You can never win in Scottish rugby, can you? And
sports fans being unreasonable. What are you talking
about? Crazy talk. So let's talk about the Whistler. Interpretation of the breakdown. Ian's got his notes there.
I've actually got hee-haw written on this.
Just like, it's time.
Make me look busy.
I personally, I thought his interpretation of the breakdown, he's obviously been given directives to speed up the whistle. I'm not sure how long that will last. Both teams were at it. I think Glasgow came off worse. Edinburgh adapted better. But Ian, your thoughts on Mr. Adamson?
Well, according to the Pro 14 website, he's given 18 penalties against Glasgow and 13 against Edinburgh. One of course, is the Stuart McInally grabbing Hastings thing, which I don't think was a penalty. That's just a behave yourself, boys, back to the halfway line. I thought there was maybe a couple. There was one particularly with Watson. He was very quick on the whistle. The one he gave against Fagerson, I think just before Edinburgh took the lead, which I thought was harsh. He said that Fagerson wasn't supporting his weight, but it looked like he was. But then there was one thing, like, I know they've been clamping down on stuff, particularly relating to safety with the jackler. But another thing about the breakdown, which kind of annoys us all, is scrum halves taking their goddamn time when they've called use it. Towards the end of the first half, he's yelled at Ali Price, use it, and it has been a full 8 seconds of Ali Price stuff. I mean, obviously, he's going to try and milk it because it was just before half time. But I was like, even myself as a Glasgow fan, I'm screaming at him, hurry up and use it. This is just boring the hell out of us. So that's one area of the game I would like to see sped up. But it's obviously these are all down to interpretations. I think a couple are a bit dodgy, but an Edinburgh fan will probably say they were absolutely fine. It is what it is.
Sandy,
almost I mean, Ian hit, and I mean, not having a chance to rewatch it, I had no problem with anything really that he did. But you would expect me to say that when you win the game. You generally only moan about them when you've lost. And I don't remember. Ian, again, he's spot on. The thing with the scrum halves is just boring as hell. It's actually more boring than scrum resets, to be honest, and those are boring in themselves. But I don't have any problem with, and I generally don't as a referee. I'm happy to see him. I mean, it's there are one or two others that I would prefer not to see before. So Mr. Adamson, to be honest, it's. I was fine with him.
That's very valid points. I think from my side, the biggest issue Glasgow had was Ian touched on the Watson was very clever, and you would expect that from Watson. He's a very, very, very sensible player, and he, to your point about watching what had happened in Super Rugby, you could clearly see he's interpreted the new rules very well, and referees are not. So the second man in, even though he's part of the tackle, the guy hasn't been tackled yet, he hasn't reached the ground. The second man in, who is coming in, making contact and bringing the person to the ground, is not being penalised as the tackler, so you can go straight over the ball. And Watson done that 3 times during the game, and it was clearly a tactic. He's standing right behind the tackler, ready to go. The tackle's made, it slows the man down. He then uses his weight, drags him down, and straight over. And if he can do that for Scotland, I'll be absolutely delirious. I'll be so happy. At the weekend, it was frustrating because he's not releasing, and you watch it back and you're like, no, there's absolutely no release. It's not even close. But Glasgow again didn't adapt to that, and there was so many times where the 2 tactics teams have used is you either jackal or you counter ruck, And that's what teams have been doing since they've come back. And Glasgow done neither. They spread out and let Edinburgh have the ball, and then kind of got smashed by them. It was it just didn't seem very sensible.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because watching some of the other games, teams have taken the ball into contact. It's looked as if they've won it only for the referee to give the penalty to the other side. So there does, which a lot of the time you're looking at now, and it's hard to see why that's happened. So, perhaps there would be a better argument for more competition at the breakdown, given that it seems on the face of it a bit of a lottery.
So let's finish off in a positive then from the game. Ian, it's not all doom and gloom for Glasgow. So any positives to take away?
No, it's all doom and gloom. No, actually, I thought Hugh Jones was pretty decent. I thought he swept up quite well. Never really had to make any one-on-one tackles. Kicked decently. There was one kick which, I don't know, a few sort of phases later ended up leading to an Edinburgh try. He could maybe have done better with that, but I mean, it was off turnover ball in Glasgow's own 22, so we just sort of leathered it to see what would happen. Didn't quite find touch. But other than that, I thought he was all right. Richie Gray defensively, I thought he was solid. He got around the park decently. He got pinged for flopping onto a rock at one point though, so he's going to have to really adapt that. That's been his sort of strategy of the last few years. Like, I'm 6'10", flop. But yeah, those things were all right. Xander Fragerson, as per usual, he was one of the top carriers. Him and Sutherland had a good BE battle. I think he had probably had the better of Sutherland once or twice. Definitely got one, the first penalty. Then Schumann came on, and there was, Chris Patterson and Jim Hamilton, I think they both thought one that went Schumann's way was a wee bit contentious. But no, his development continues. You know what? Sorry, can I? You said ending up positive. No, I'm bringing it back down. That is a hell of a lot of missed tackles from Glasgow. You're looking at 89% tackle success. This is the weird thing. See the Pro 14 stats and the ESPN stats, there's quite a big discrepancy. Because the Pro 14 stats, they've got Glasgow missing 18 tackles. So that's to give them a sort of 89% success rate. But on ESPN, it's got them missing 29, which makes it an 83%.
That's because the Pro 14 stats are based on the Premier Sports coverage, so it was glitching, so it's counting as two missed tackles.
That'll be it, yeah. But as well, like, as you know, Sandy's quiz last week, I'd had a wee look on that, and Glasgow's tackle success rate for the entire season is 86%, and that's not good enough. The line out is honking. The line out, we've got the second worst line out in the league apparently. So yeah, there's definitely some work-ons.
I think McInally and the gang were doing their best to kind of try and they were doing a hold my beer moment at the weekend for that one, Sandy. Doing their best to kind of lose as much as possible and give Glasgow ball. But for you, obviously very happy, but plenty of positives to take forward. What was the big takeaways for you?
The second half performance, which is again, it's been something that's been typical throughout this elongated, truncated season, whatever way you want to look at it. I mean, I had a look at it. Somebody had said the last 5 games we had conceded hardly any points in the second half, and I just thought, well, I wonder what it's been in the whole season. And you're talking about 9 points in the second half in all games this season. So that's quite a success. I'm impressed that there wasn't that much kicking from hand. They tried to do more with the ball and use the back. I mean, it was a bit of a surprise. I think I texted you guys in the first half to say that I think, because I had bet on Duhan to score a hat trick, but
that's right. Yeah.
Halfway through the first half, I don't think he touched the ball 3 times. But when he did, it was pretty had a big impact on the destination of the game. So Jacko, I've already mentioned. I think he's looks really good. Really, that's what I'd written. So just the second half thing, I think it's the big thing for me is that they look fit and they were able to sustain it, and the bench now looks pretty strong. I mean, when you've got either Sutherland or Schumann to come off the bench for a loose head, that's pretty good stuff, and it looks as if they've got that working the right way around. Bit light in the second row in terms of injuries, and I think it's the big interest for me this weekend is, probably don't want to play Jacko because, he's our only first team standoff. But then if you play Chamberlain and he's injured, then who do you put on the bench for the next game? It's a huge dilemma, and I'll be tuning in for the team selection.
Kinghorn to 10.
Well, to be fair, that's the other one, because there's not a full. We've got Hoyland as a fullback, but I've never seen any announcement. But there was a picture of him on Instagram in the changing room on Saturday with a moon boot on. So he's obviously done something. It's generally not something that disappears overnight. So we don't really have an awful lot of choices at fullback either, unless Darcy's fit, and I don't know about that either. So.
Do you think there would be like a full-blown riot across the Irish Sea if, let's say, like you said, you're a bit short on tens and locks, if Glasgow just did short-term loan deals to Edinburgh to help them win the first team? They Chamberlain have at Hastings.
Yeah, lovely. They've done it because I'm trying to remember who it was. There was a guy who was with Glasgow, ended up at London Scottish, and then came back to Edinburgh on a short-term loan, I think midway through last season when there was a back row crisis. I'm trying to remember his name. I don't care he was on the bench once for Edinburgh and then went back to London Scottish. But it was one of these ones you think, surely you just can't borrow somebody in the middle of the season, but they did. But I think they might call foul on that, but I'm sure they've done worse.
It would be worth it though, wouldn't it?
It was
so good. Yeah, I could get on board with that. I would be fine with that. But that's one way that. So I guess we'll finish up on this semi-final to come, Sandy. Fairly confident, I would imagine. Decent side you're against, but should, if you play well, get the better of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly in the balance and it's eminently winnable. Ulster have been quite a difficult side for us in recent years. Three wins out of the last 10. It's not, but the games have all been pretty close. Couple of last minute penalties. One we won by a last minute penalty and then lost another one to the boot of the Ulster scrum half, John Cooney. So Cooney, yeah. So yeah, but at home, I fancy us to win that as long as they keep the lead.
Was that a dodgy Ben Whitehouse moment? I think at the start of this season, wasn't it?
For no, it wasn't Whitehouse. It was
Oh no, it was the South African one, wasn't it?
Aye.
Nick Berry.
Nick Berry. Aye. He told. It was Henry, I think, it was playing, and he told them to use it. It was a maul, and he said once, and then they were still moving forward a wee bit, and obviously expecting to hear twice, and instead he just blew up and said it stopped and you hadn't used it, and it was in the dying seconds of the game. Ulster got the ball and ended up scoring, so it was a bit galling, but that's the way it goes.
And I guess, Ian, if we're looking for any inspiration for Edinburgh, has Andy's just decided to leave? Just that. His mic dropped and he's off.
I thought you might hear the dishwasher, so I turned it off.
All right.
We thought you were just like, inspiration? We don't need inspiration. We're out here, mate. No, so looking for inspiration for semi-final wins against Ulster. We've got a few memories of that over this end of the M8. So hopefully Ed, and you will hear me say this, hopefully Edinburgh will be able to do it, even though I predicted my Nostradamus streak the other week there. I will be firmly going into reverse gear with that in due course. But I do hope Edinburgh do it, because we don't really like Ulster, to be honest. And
that, John, that hurt, didn't it? That really hurt.
I know I'm gonna have to pause this and go for a wee cry in the corner now.
Every word was dragged out.
Kicking and screaming. And Hugh Jones would have caught them.
I don't buy Cocker saying that Edinburgh, the least fancied of the 4 teams. I reckon they can beat Ulster. Leinster are obviously the favourites, but you look at the season as the tables stand. Edinburgh get the second best record. They've only lost 3 games all season. Yeah. Home advantage, and Cockers has got them playing particularly well. Like he was saying last week, yes, it was all sort of structured and that, and you'd expect that from a guy who used to be with Leicester and their famed sort of forward pack. So you'd expect a guy to come from that and be all about set piece precision, power up front. But like you said, they've really developed their game, and in the back 3 they've got real threats everywhere. So they've got a chance. I mean, that's like the game on Saturday. I was thinking, see if that was like 3 years ago, the roles probably would have been reversed, because Glasgow had like a fully informed Tommy Seymour, you had Stuart Hogg. They're the ones who can do that little game breaking bit of magic, but it was Doohan this time. So yeah, Kinghorn as well had a good game. Like I said, he said, he made plenty of meters. So there's real potent attacking threats, and I thought Dean and Bennett had really good games as well. Mark Bennett, was very sad to see him leave Glasgow, and if you try and tell me that Nick Grigg's a better player than Mark Bennett, I think you're an idiot.
No, yeah, I think you're right.
Dear. So a couple of shout outs on Facebook. We've got a couple of people with us tonight. Hi everyone who's tuned in. As I said that, 6 people apparently left, so cheers. Andy Lone has been dropping some comments. Nice try from Sam Hidalgo Klein for Exeter tonight. Do we think he's caught the eye? We've went with eye and then 2 wee eyes. Good, I like it. Of Scotland selectors for November. What do we think, boys?
I've not been able to watch it because my girlfriend took my tablet. But scrum half isn't an area we're short on players. But if he shows good form, he might be a sort of mercenary that goes walking about like the littlest hobo. But he's been playing with top quality teams. So he's probably picked up a few wee tricks, and if he can, get himself a regular spot in that Exeter, probably going to be champions. With the English Premier League, that's another string at his bow. So there's a chance. Pyrgos isn't getting any younger.
Sandy, you'll be batting off the "we should have kept him" brigade, aye?
Yeah, I mean, I knew tonight it wouldn't take long before somebody had said it. Don't get me wrong, I like the guy. I think he's got talent. He definitely does, and probably threw one of the best dummies I'd ever seen a scrum half do a game against Scarlets for Edinburgh before he left. But I've always had the sneaking suspicion that he's somebody who's great at the start of a contract and also great at the end of a contract and not so good in the middle. And it's only when he's needing, footage for his highlights reel for his next move that you really see the best of him. I'm maybe being a bit harsh on the guy, but it just, I mean, you don't have that many clubs in such a short space of time. If people are thinking you're definitely worth keeping. Although, Rob Baxter doesn't seem to be like a daft man by any manner of means. So hopefully he can manage him in a way that we get that consistent guy that we saw those years ago, and maybe he'll be back if that's the case. I mean, I think I said that in my piece on the Scottish players in the English League at the start of the restart. So I wish him well. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're absolutely right. He's a player who his form fluctuates a lot, and it's not a position we're light on. If he was a 10, he would be in the reckoning. But so other comment we've had, Mark Anderson, sort of in in response to comment about maybe Glasgow being a wee bit more, let's say, less fluid in attack. That's the euphemistic way that I'll put it. He says, honestly, I think this is the end of Glasgow showboating, but hopefully once they gel, we'll see more solid yet perhaps more sterile performances. Do you think the Scotstoun massive, Ian, will accept that?
If it gets results, yes. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what you're after. You know, a win's a win and all of that. But that was one of the stats I'd seen. I mean, I think Glasgow only threw 2 offloads. Obviously, we've got big Leone coming back, so that's going to...
That'll change.
Yeah, that's like times that by about 40 per match. Yeah, I mean, it's that midfield doesn't exactly... I mean, Horn and Grigg... And I'm not one of the Pete Horn hating brigade. I like Pete Horn. He does his work rate's excellent. He's usually a decent distributor when he's not throwing intercepts. And he's quite a smart player, and he's always been good foil for the likes of Finn Russell. But yeah, I mean, Danny Wilson, Cardiff were quite an interesting attacking team when he was down there. So I don't know I don't think it'll be Tooney madness. But I don't know if it'll be sterile as such. But I do think it will maybe tone down a wee bit. But that's only simply because we don't have the top class world quality players anymore.
That's it. You can only play the game with what you have. Yeah. So shall we move on? Unless anyone has anything else to add about the weekend, this is your last chance to have a brag, Sandy. So
no, I'll let the team say it all.
Let the team say it all. Well done. That's very, very dignified of you. And that big cheeser
and
says
the colours.
So, moving on to, sorry, I'm just digging for the text. Yeah, moving on to, we had a couple of absolute belters for Wales Dougie Donnelly. Now, since we found Dougie at the big club dinner, he's obviously been, there's been less chat about trying to find folk, but we had one on match day, a certain Richard Cockrell. So this was Marine sent this in, tagged Cammy on Twitter, it looks like, and said, just seen Richard Cockrell at Bruntsfield in Edinburgh. He was carrying a Tesco bag and looked like he'd been to Greg's for a cup of something and a chocolate cake / muffin, which he was eating while walking down the road, obviously in training for later today. So that to me is an absolute belter of a Wales Dougie Donnelly. The mundane detail in there is superb. And it got us thinking about other potential orders. So we're thinking about Greg's is open now. It's been open for a wee while. Everyone missed Mr. Greg's when it was locked down. What would our players' orders be at Greg's? Now, we've had a few sort of mad suggestions for Finn. One on Twitter, there was Alan and Rona were going back and forward about whether he would get Diet Lucozade and 3 or 6 donuts. You guys get any? Have you prepared? Have you done your homework?
I'm afraid not.
I'd said Finn it would be 3 fudge donuts, a pack of hula hoops, and a Lucozade Zero, just so he avoids the sugar tax. Pierre Schumann would probably just get like 40 steak bakes. Yeah,
and that would be fine. I mean, that's like, it's like a decent hangover cure, really, isn't it? Can't go wrong with a steak bake.
I had a steak bake on Saturday. It was great.
I don't even need to make it up, but I did see Alan Jacobson eating a steak bake for Greg's not that long ago, so that was a genuine one.
He should be the poster boy of Greg's, really. Like he could properly stand up. So in Scotland, if you were to do a regionalised marketing campaign in and around Edinburgh, you would just have big chunk with a steak bake, just going, Greg's, mate.
And a spanner in the other hand.
Yeah, absolutely. We also had another Where's Dougie Donnelly. We had Johnny Rowe. Got in touch, tagged us on Twitter, saying he had spied big Zandbags himself, Xander Fagerson, in Tesco in Maryhill early on Sunday morning.
We're getting a lot of free advertising here.
Indeed, yeah. Johnny, we need to know how early on a Sunday morning. This really does change the story, but, it's important. Not able to ascertain his shopping habits post-1872, but can confirm he observes polite zebra crossing etiquette in his huge Mercedes. So, again, plenty of really good detail in there. Personally, I would like to know how early on a Sunday, because, these pro athletes, they are in their bed really early. Was it a hangover dash? Was it a you're in fat camp? Who knows?
Or has Xander been out all night at the dancing?
Has Xander been out all night having a party? Who knows?
Dancing in his handbag.
Apparently Xander's a big quiet boy. I don't think there's any chance he'll be out partying. So if there's any,
the ones you least expect.
Obviously we're talking about Greg's, but obviously going back to Greig in his party days. So if anyone does have footage of Xander out at the dancing on Saturday night, please send it through. Otherwise, we will assume that he was spending the night in reading a romantic novel with. Am I right in saying he plays a weird instrument as well? Because Cammy plays tuba or something, doesn't he? And I think then does that, or is it Xander's brother? I think is it Xander's brother he's a musician. I'm not making this up. I'm fairly sure Cam said this.
Right.
I think his brother's a musician, but maybe they were having a wee night and listening to the classical tunes, getting prepared for the proms.
I know he plays PlayStation, but I seen him once on Twitter.
I don't think that's I don't think it's the same thing either.
The Last of Us has The Last of Us Part 2 has a bit you can play guitar. So there
you go. Yeah, well,
I am rubbish at it. I've completed the game, but I skipped that bit. Just went go kill.
The only reason you're rubbish at it is because you're trying to do Hailstorm riffs on it. So suggestions for the Greg's order. We had Michael was in touch saying tuna is definitely a sausage, bean and cheese melt. Doesn't like the classics, so tries to go off the wall, which I think is a pretty good effort. So moving onwards, I suppose. Since
Adam Hastings, no sugar. You don't want to damage those teeth.
Those teeth are magnificent. Those are teeth that I aspire to. Absolute gleamers. So I mean that's that. On you go, Sandy.
I was going to say, is that not teeth that you would get at Aspire?
Well, yes, of course.
Very good.
Yes, yes, we should probably confirm we are not. Well, we're always in the market for some sponsorship if they want to come our way, but we are not currently endorsing Tesco or any other supermarket or Aspire.
Whereas it was talking about sponsors, it was brought to my attention today that Mr. Jim Hamilton's podcast now has a gentleman's grooming kit as their main sponsor for grooming not for your face, but I'm sure you can imagine. So their big sponsor now is
I mean, I've seen the have you seen the back shaving device? Have you seen that? It's like, oh man, it's kind of like, well, as you can imagine, it's like, but it's on a sort of like almost spring-mounted kind of blade, so that you get into all the nooks and crannies.
Do your own.
I mean, this pops up in my Instagram feed like all the time. I hardly ever go on Instagram, but every time they're like, "Mate, you seem like the kind of guy with a pure hairy back," which is accurate.
Is this another one of your weird wish suggestions?
My weird wish things. 17-string bass guitar. What? And there was
That's not the strangest one, let's be honest.
No, there was the one before that.
We'll keep this PC. We'll keep this PC.
No, that's for the Patreons only.
Apparently so. I suppose, we're gabbing enough rubbish here. So let's move on and we'll go hands in the ruck now, finish up. So our any other business section. I really pity anyone that stumbled upon this podcast as the first time they've come to us. Hands in the ruck. Our divine overlord himself has got in touch with some hands in the ruck. He says, I picked the wrong week not to do the podcast. Here's my hands in the ruck. So I'll go through these in one at a time.
Alphabetical order.
Yeah, it's bad when you have to load a message in a database form to get what you need to. So I saw some of this on Twitter earlier on, but so Irish Rugby have used female models instead of the women's players for the women's shirts, but obviously have used Conor Murray et al. For the men's shirts. Cammy said the models are more likely paid more than the women players. Also, the idiots who've replied to Rona Lloyd commenting this, saying women rugby players won't shift shirts, so they use models instead. In fairness, the SRU do use women players. Not a great look for the Irish rugby.
Although in Canterbury's defence, Canterbury did reply pretty quickly. They've said that production on jerseys was halted due to the pandemic, and then they've had problem booking in, being able to arrange a photo shoot. Although somebody did point out, could you not just have photoshopped the shirt strips on? So, I think Canterbury have come out and said this, so I'll take them on their word for face value there, but they'd better sort it out. I think, if there isn't, as with post-haste, an Irish women's rugby team players wearing the new shirt as part of a promotional campaign, then you're a bunch of liars.
The thing for me, seeing the picture earlier on, it was so the women, or the models within the shirts, they obviously are not rugby players, so they don't look like rugby players, and it kind of looked like a kids team with those shirts kind of draped over them a wee bit. Like the wee guys get the shirt that's too big for them.
Yeah, they were uniform model shape, shall we say, rather than the various body shapes that you can get in rugby. So.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting as well, the various people have replied to that thread, pointing out, obviously, as I said, the SRU do use the women's team to model the women's kits. Makes sense. The English do the same, as do the Welsh. So, if there's kits getting released after this point, I would imagine that the marketing teams will be making sure that the international athletes who fill those jerseys are put front and centre, as they rightly should be.
And God help them if they Photoshop any of it as well.
Yes. It's quite disappointing, Sandy, isn't it, that we're still having to have this conversation.
I mean, it is. It's just, to be honest, when you put it in the context of all the other home nations using the actual rugby players, it's kind of indefensible, really. It's just, it doesn't, you don't, I mean, as Ian says, we'll let Canterbury, if they genuinely have had an issue and they want to put it right, as long as they put it right, hopefully that will be an outcome that prevents us from happening ever again. So
let's move on to Cam's part two, shall we? Part two of 3/4. Courtney Laws claiming his free speech is being infringed on Rugby Pass. Thus exercising his right to free speech on the biggest rugby news site in the world. He then claimed he lost sponsorship work due to his views, which is, I can't repeat that, Cammy, come on, to do with free speech, and more to do with him not wanting to accept any consequences of free speech, like companies he works for exercising their free speech to tell him to, and I'll paraphrase here, to go away. Yes, Courtney Laws has not come out of lockdown looking very good, has he?
To be honest, not that I had thought a great deal about Courtney Laws before, but when he came out with this thing about how poor people shouldn't have children, he kind of nosedived even below that, to be honest, in my estimations. And it kind of falls back on what I was saying last week about rugby players in their mansions casting aspersions on how everybody else does. It's not a good look, to be honest. And when you're defended by, people like Andy Good, that's not a good look as well. I don't think, to be honest. But it's just, I think I comment saying he's on one of the biggest rugby websites in the world, talking about how he's not got a platform. not really buying it, to be honest.
Should come on this podcast and speak to us.
Yeah. Well, he was on the Rugby pod with Jim Hamilton. I think that's where this came from, the Rugby Pass article. So he's on a pod. He's on a very popular podcast, and like you said, he's on like the most well-read rugby news site in the entire world. I was like, I'm getting, people are shouting me down. You've been given an opportunity to speak. You've spoken, and it just so turns out a lot of people think you're a bit of an ass.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so my kind of thoughts on this, and there's maybe a niche for us here, guys. So you'll thank me for this afterwards. But there's obviously a lack of proper management of certain types of rugby player. Courtney Laws being the most, the latest high profile example of it. A lot of players seem to forget that they speak their mind and they say what they think about a range of issues, a range of social issues in a lot of cases. And they forget the privileged position they have as professional sports people. We pay them or they get paid to play sport. They don't get paid to pass judgment on the rest of the world. And I think their management need to be having a word with them and reminding them of that. And Courtney Laws, if he's not getting social media managed just now, certainly some of the things he said over the lockdown period, if I was a sponsor or someone who's financially involved in a team that Courtney Laws plays for, I would certainly be suggesting that perhaps that might be an idea, because it doesn't do, it's similar to, I think this actually, if I'm right, this kind of, it sort of touches on Cammy's third point, but we'll come to that. It's similar again to your Exeter Chiefs stuff. It's just in terms of the actual, there's no money in rugby normally, and there's no money in rugby right now. So marketing and branding and making sure that you are promoting a positive image is so important. And people just seem to be not taking it seriously. And that's what the Courtney Laws thing. I remember seeing the comment that you mentioned, Sandy, and being absolutely aghast that a person who has represented his country and who is essentially a role model for thousands of kids down south, that he would say things like that. It's disgraceful.
It's not, I sometimes wonder, it's not even the fact that he holds such weird views. It's the fact that he doesn't realise that expressing them will cause a furore.
Yep.
And that it's like a lack of self-awareness a wee bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't mind people. It's a bit like folks saying to singers and bands, shut up and sing. If you want to express an opinion, but don't expect, if it's a weird opinion, then nobody's going to pick you up on it. It's just not going to happen. You've got to expect to take the brickbats if you're happy to dish it out. Or did he just expect us to go, you know what, Courtney, you're absolutely spot on, mate, and leave it alone?
Bang on, pal. No, this is the thing. Like, if he's moaning about losing sponsors, that's because you're not meeting their brand values, whatever companies it is, right? See if that's the case, go and find a company that does want to sponsor you, who will be right behind you. So you're probably going to get the Daily Mail and the Express, and that's about it.
And Jim Hamilton's new mob.
Yeah,
the male grooming kit. So that'll be you'll be sorted. So let's Cam's got one more, but I'll kind of combine these two. So we'll give you one just now, Ian. So you got a wee hands in the ruck menchie today. I've not used the term menchie in ages, so that felt really good. I felt really good. You got back to my roots. A wee menchie, mate, from Rhiannon. Again on Twitter, you got a wee hands in the ruck shout out. So the Muppet who's just implied, I'm reading this word for word. This is not my views, although it probably is. The Muppet who's just implied that Ian's not a big enough Glasgow fan, because if he were, he would want to travel to Edinburgh and risk spreading COVID-19, because that's what true fans do. Star, silent screaming star. Yeah. The whole ticket situation so obviously we didn't touch on it in the news, but Glasgow, Edinburgh this Friday night is going to be a test event for the return of fans to stadia. We expect there to be around about 700 supporters allowed into the ground. The guidance that's been issued from Edinburgh and the SRU is that it will be season ticket holders. Thanks for that, Ian. Season ticket holders with a priority given to those who are closest to Murrayfield to minimise public transport. Obviously, I think a number of us had said at the beginning of all this stuff kicking off that when supporters do return to stadia, it was never going to be at full capacity. And there was always going to be issues with that. And that we really hoped that people wouldn't go down the route of being a Roman Platt about it. And this is actually my hands. I think people are just being so ridiculous. I get people want to go to rugby, right? You want to go to games. You want to go and see your heroes live in a stadium with 699 other people in the cavernous 67,000 stadium. It's going to be a bit rubbish. I'm just telling you now. The atmosphere's, 700 people in that stadium is not going to create an atmosphere. Sorry to tell you that.
It's not when you're like, there's 40 over there and then another 50.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the Mexican wave alone is not going to be very good.
I think what the gentleman that Rhiannon is alluding to, he seemed to take major umbrage with the fact that I said, well, it's a test event, with 1.1% capacity for what is essentially a meaningless game. And this is the deadest of dead rubbers. To which he was like, well, it might be meaningless to you, but it's not meaningless to a lot of Warriors fans. Well, it's meaningless to the club because it's going to make a hee-haw difference to your final league standing. It's not going to do anything. It is a knock. Like I said, it's a pre-season friendly, basically, is what it is. It is meaningless. It's as pointless a match as you're going to get. The only reason they put these matches on is probably to meet some kind of Premier Sports deal.
We must have played a certain number of games. Yep, absolutely.
And also to get players fit for the semi-finals. That's what these. I mean,
or to get the Irish clubs into the semi-finals.
Well, I mean, from the outset, like Glasgow, we had, like Sandy said, we were relying on a sort of series of miracles in order to get through. We were going to have to beat Edinburgh twice with bonus points and hope that Ulster didn't claim a single bonus point whatsoever. And I think there was points difference as well.
Yep,
possibly coming to it. So I mean, these were just knock-up games. And it is meaningless, and if that doesn't make me a true Warriors fan, then so be it.
Well said. I'll apologise in advance for anyone that's viewing this back.
See, I waited for the wee yellow square to go off before I did that. So
fair enough.
See?
Fair enough.
Clever.
That was smart. It's like you've been practicing. So, Sandy. Obviously, the other side of the M8, you will get a few people in. Has there been the same level of ridiculousness from your side of things?
There has, in part, yeah. I mean, there's a lot. I've seen a lot of folk complaining that they had given up. They had given up the last portion of their season ticket to support the club, and whilst they've had the email to apply for tickets, they feel they should be getting it for nothing. I mean, I'm in the draw, and we'll see what happens. If I get a ticket, it's great. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because it's not. I don't see it being any better against Ulster. In fact, there might not be anybody against Ulster because this is I mean, they made it quite clear this is a test event. It's not a sliding scale. Next week we'll have 1,400, and the week after that we'll have 2,800. That's not, or at least it's not the plan at the moment. So it's and somebody said, I'm going to wait to apply for the game via Ulster, and I think, well, you might be a wee bit out of luck because I don't think there's going to be anybody at that. I think it's crazy to get yourself wound up. I mean, it's odd because this is obviously for Edinburgh. This is, on one hand, it's probably potentially going to be their best ever season. Well, it is their best ever season. and then on the other hand, you're not going to get to see very much of it in the way you would want to. But potentially wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been for the way that this happened, because there was still a lot of games to be played. And if the season had gone on for the right length, perhaps we would have fallen away. So you've got to take it with a pinch of salt and just enjoy it in whatever way you can, I think. I won't be bothered if we win it and I've not managed to be there. I'll still be delighted. I won't be bothered that it's been a truncated version. I'll still be delighted, and I'll still be waving my hands in the air in a very un-Edinburgh-like way. But so I don't see any point. I just don't see any point in getting yourself wound up, because it was always they were never going to get it right for everybody. There are plenty of good Edinburgh fans who don't stay in Edinburgh. I'm not one. I mean, I don't stay in the city itself, so perhaps even my postcode's not going to do the trick when it comes right down to it. But we shall see.
We shall see.
I would just like to add, that me and John, if you do win the Pro 14, we'll like put an asterisk beside it. Tainted title, mate.
And I'll just be showing you a picture of the trophy.
As it rightly should be. So, Cam's final point. I'll kind of. He's getting bothered about us still going on. He's got a cheek. We quite regularly go on for absolutely ages. You don't have to edit this, Cam. It's perfect the way it is, raw and uncut, like it should be. Cam's
like how John likes his cocaine.
And there
allegedly.
Allegedly. And there we go. There's the editing that he now needs to do. Cam's final point was, and I think you were involved in this as well, Ian. There was a bit of a rammy regarding the whole Black Lives Matter and the kind of show of unity at the start of the game, and people suggesting that we don't have a racism problem in Scottish rugby, we don't have racism in Scotland, that's an American thing, so why are players standing in a circle at kick-off? I don't think we need to dignify this too much with any sort of airtime other than get back under your rock and go follow another sport. Like, genuinely, if that's your attitude, I find it hard to fathom. Anyone who thinks that Scotland doesn't have a racism problem is actually somewhere else, frankly. That's such a silly thing to say.
I mean, there was a Hoyt player banned in February for racial abuse. There's I can't remember who's on it. BT Sport are doing a sort of ident thing about racism. It's called Ugo Monye and stuff. And then there's people going, I don't think there's any racism in rugby at all. What's going on here? Maybe look on the internet. You know what newspapers and stuff are? No, there is racism in every walk of life, right? So, we all know this. But if you don't think it's in rugby, then you, like you said, you're living under a rock. There's examples there. I mean, if you look here on Rugby Pass at any article about, say, a Khaleesi, for example, you will just see absolute hateful nonsense from the All Lives Matter crowd under there. So, there is racism in rugby. I mean, for Christ's sake, South African players, I don't want to sort of say the wrong person, but was there not a well-known loose-head prop who refused to share a room with a black player during the 99 World Cup, I think, or even the 2003 World Cup? So yes, rugby is very prevalent everywhere. Racism is very prevalent everywhere, and it is in rugby.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. Right, guys, we will crack on unabated. Let's go. Can we have your hands in the ruck, Sandy?
Yeah, this is. I had already decided what I was going to say, and then friend of the pod, Alan McDonald, messaged me to say the same thing. So my hands in the ruck is people moaning about the fact there's going to be pillars holding up the roof at the new Mini Murrayfield Stadium. It's just, it's been however long we've not had a place to call our own. It is a sort of temporary, but it's a £10 million temporary. I don't know what a bricks and mortar stadium's going to cost, but it's not 10 million quid, clearly. And whilst I've got, whilst we're lucky that rugby is a sport that actually moves up and down a bit and you can actually follow it with your eyes or with your head, it shouldn't really matter that there's posts. Just be grateful that we've got a place, and that in a financial climate that we can't even afford to get another standoff to the club, that the SRU have decided that they're going to go ahead with a project that's costing quite a lot of money. I think we need there's a few Edinburgh supporters on this just need to kind of get a bit of a reality check, to be honest. It's as good as it's going to be at the moment, and it's, and if they're worried about the style, there's going to be some orange goalposts. So,
be glad you've got a post holding up a roof, eh? And
yes,
be glad you have a roof.
Aye. Are the goalposts going to light up?
I don't know. They're going to be coloured orange, but
they better.
Aye.
I don't care.
Light up goalposts would be pretty cool.
I wonder how that will affect the goal kickers. What do you reckon?
That's only once it goes through. That'll be quite good though. No, because I mind, you'll be able to see them.
Aye, exactly.
Be able to see the ball cross the plane of the post a wee bit easier. That's for sure.
There'll be the contrast between posts.
This is what we bring, guys. Innovation. Every time we come up with new solutions for rugby's pressing problems. We had chat obviously recently about the booing the kicker, and obviously no fans being there, how that would impact kickers. We're now solving the goal kicking issue with posts. Ian's pointing his finger at me.
Yeah, that's a point actually. You know what we should do? We should collate the goal kicking figures when we've had like silence to when we've got booing.
And then we can
do a comparison.
We can use this as empirical evidence that booing the goal kicker is good for them.
Yeah, we're helping you. Encourage us to boo.
We're encouraging you to get it right.
Just as an aside, actually, it reminded me that on watching the Ulster game on Sunday, that all the other crowd noise over the weekend, the taped-in crowd noise was kind of generic, but for some reason I still managed to hear "Stand Up for the Ulstermen" on Sunday. So I don't know how they've managed to sneak that in there.
I'm saying nothing regarding that. That's I also heard that our pals down in Exeter, there was some chopping going on over the tannoy as well, which fantastic, eh? Honestly,
they're still selling mascot memorabilia.
Are they?
Although they said they retired the mascot, apparently stuff still available online, like little plushy toys and what have you. What was he called again? Just the chief or something like that.
Big chief.
Big chief or something. Yeah.
I call my boss Big Chief occasionally, but it's not in the same. It's not in the same context.
And are they Native American?
No.
There we go, see?
No, they're chief as in boss, and he's quite a big gentleman. So, so yes, big. It's that kind of classic West Coast thing, isn't it?
All right, chief.
All right, chief, and everything becomes like once you reach a certain mass, it becomes big. So you have to, big chief. There you go, sorted. So I think you're absolutely right, Ian. Hands in das Rock.
What?
Give us your hands in the rock.
Oh, but I told you what mine was. It was the Warriors fans moaning about the tickets, and then Rhiannon nicked it. You knew this earlier this afternoon.
Fair enough. I was giving you did. I know. It just shows I don't pay attention to your messages most of the time, mate.
Well, that's the best thing for it. And also we've prattled on for a bit, haven't we?
A wee bit. Cammy says he was only kidding, and he was actually wanting to edit a 2-hour effort. So.
Just for a friend of the pod, Alan McDonald. Then do you want to dust off the old crisp chat?
See when he messaged about that the other day, I remember there was some Roysters in the cupboard, and I went and I tanned a couple of packets. They were fantastic, and I found that there's a couple of shops doing those kind of wee salt, the wee pretzels, the wee kind of baked pretzels. Oh, can't go wrong. There you go.
That's a good crisp right there.
That's a solid crisp, Ian. That's a solid crisp.
Not as good as they used to be, I think.
Oh.
The wee multi-pack ones are so much smaller as well. You don't get like, you have to buy yourself like a share pack. And you think, like, this is a bad look because obviously I'm going to eat this myself, but it's too big for a single man. But you still got to tan it. It's
true, very true.
I mean, you could pad it out by making a sandwich out of it.
That's true. It's true. I think there's a market actually for, like, so we've obviously not went into we're obviously trying to give Scottish Rugby some ideas for marketing, and we've talked about official crisp suppliers and stuff like that, but there's definitely a market for some sort of official Nordic yogurt in Scottish Rugby. Get where I'm going with this, right? So there's some seriously good Nordic yogurt out there, and apparently I'm a big fan of yogurt these days, and I found that Aldi there's a skier yogurt by Graham's, and it's super berry. Now, I don't think there's a berry in here, right? But they claim it's super berry, and they do the wee pots of it, and they're usually good value. I've just found that they do big pots for the same price, and it's like a 500ml monster, and so I tanned one of them the other day, just in a winner. I was very happy with life.
Man, that's the pure bizarre thing about larger sizes of things, because you said that was the same price as a small pot. So the Royal Infirmary where I used to work, right, the news agent there, a 500ml bottle of Iron Brew was like £1.40, but then you could buy a litre one which wasn't in the fridge for £1.
So relating this back to rugby, maybe this is us suggesting to the SRU that when we eventually do get fans back into Murrayfield, if they wanted to create bigger sizes of things and charge us the same price as the wee scabby hamburgers they sell us, and the seven fries you get alongside it for like 16,000 quid. I'm obviously being facetious, so if MD from the SRU is watching, I don't believe that your food is 16,000 quid. Ian is probably more accurate with £4.50. Don't at me.
Yes.
That's just for the chips, though. You're putting the burger on top. That's probably
true.
About £6 for that.
Must be more than that these days. But yes, maybe they should look at their food prices and give us some more food for our money. If the discount supermarkets can do it, so can you, SRU. That's my challenge to you tonight.
I think that was my hands in the rock maybe 2 years ago. And that amazing stadium in Atlanta, the Mercedes one with the roof that kind of closed over, the sort of Irish one. They noticed they put the prices of all their concession stands down, and they noticed way more customers using the facilities there rather than just sitting out tailgating.
Right. So they would come in at the stadium early.
Yeah. So, and then it's just like if they're paying standard price for a beer rather than like $8 or whatever, they're like, all right, cool, give me $5.
Well, you know yourself as well. Like, you tend to, when you go through games, you start off where you can get a couple of cheap beers. And then eventually, once you've had quite a few, you start to think, I'll go and I'll begrudgingly pay I'll get a couple of stadium beers.
And of course, you never drink on the train.
No, absolutely not, because that would be irresponsible and
illegal.
And yes, and Scotty would have words with us. So, but yeah, I think there's maybe something in that in terms of, we all know the match day experience can be quite fun. If it's buzzing around the ground, there's plenty of money to be had as well. So, yeah. If some poor wee intern, somebody watch this, I guess there you go. You can have that one for free. Take that one to your bosses and see what you can do for us. So, any more, or shall we finish up and give Cammy a break?
All done.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I've prolonged his agony enough.
I know he'll really be unhappy that we decided to try and throw some crisp chat in there to try and prolong this for him. So if anyone has stayed with us for the duration of that, well done, you absolute masochist. You deserve a medal and a shout out. Obviously, at the start of the point, I didn't mention that we do have a Patreon for people to subscribe to if they want to support the work we're doing here. I mean, come on. You can for the cost of a beer. We've already talked beer. A cost significantly less than the cost of a Murrayfield beer. You can get access to the Dougie Donnelly President Suite, which will get you ad-free audio for the podcast, and you'll get access to the exclusive Patreon Facebook page, and you'll get exclusive content. It's all gravy. You can also pay a wee bit more, £5 a month. Sorry, I've got them the wrong way around. £5 a month gets you into the Dougie Donnelly suite. £3 a month gets you into the Richie Vernon Thunderdome, which does sound class. So if you do want to give us a wee bit of your spare change and support the work we do here, that would be grand. But I guess now that we've put the begging bowl round, it is a good night from me and good night from Sandy and Ian.
Cheerio.
Hey, folks.